Matrinarc. Always about her. The narcissist appears in various different roles in the lives of many people. The most talked about one, of course, is in the romantic dynamic, because that's often seen as causing the most damage to people and is often viewed as the most harmful. However, there will be many people who will disagree with that and will say that having a familial narcissist is actually worse, because particularly where you were an infant child, you simply could not escape that narcissist in the way that it's easier to do so as an adult entering a relationship. No matter how difficult it might feel to get away from that person as an adult, you have the opportunity to do so. But when you're a child, you have little choice. Many people, of course, talk about the experience that they've had at the hands of a patriarch or a matriarch. As some of you are aware, that I've explained elsewhere that my mother, who I refer to as the matriarch, and an individual who, on the few occasions when I'm around her, I only reference her by her first name. I never call her mother or mum, because I don't see that she's fulfilled a role in that regard. The fact that I refer to her by her Christian name annoys her. It's challenge fuel, which is why I do it, because it amuses me. And I will invariably talk about her as if she's not there. So, for instance, let us say she's called Harriet. She's not. But if I was talking to my sister, I would say, "So, what has Harriet been doing as of late?" And of course, Harriet would be sat there at the end of the dinner table saying, "You know, I am here." Even with her advanced age, she is still able to muster up a venomous response, although it has no impact on me, other than to cause me to laugh inwardly at her pathetic attempts to try and assert control over me. Because, of course, my own mother is a narcissist, an unaware one, but is upper mid-range. Cold, icy, very effective with those around her, save me, of course. My brother and sister and my half-brother recognise that she can be an unpleasant individual, recognise that there is something not quite right about her, that some of her behaviours are increasingly problematic. But particularly with regard to my brother and sister, they are governed by the corrupting effect of their emotional thinking, which causes them, like many adult children of a narcissist, to say, "But it's my mother. I can't abandon her. I can't go no contact with her. After all, she's my mother." That, of course, cuts no ice with me, but nevertheless, it is not my job to rescue them from their own stupidity of continuing to involve themselves with her. Whether the narcissist is your father, it might be an uncle, grandparent, brother, sister, or mother. Those of you who have been caught in the familial dynamic with a narcissist will be able to regale with tales of difficult and horrendous behaviours and the problem that you have felt both as a child, an infant child, and then as an adult child of that particular individual. You will know full well the impact it has had upon you. It has shaped what you have become. And indeed, for many of you, the impact of this individual has continued throughout your adult life. Interference in your relationships, causing problems with regard to, say, involving grandchildren, trying to police your own life, causing you to feel that you're never good enough. And it is along those lines that I have created this video about the matriarch and how it's always about her, utilising an article from an individual that has appeared in Stylist magazine, which is entitled, "It Was Always About Her, How Growing Up with a Narcissistic Mother Shapes You." I'm going to dive into this article to see what it shares and to see whether it's accurate or not with regard to the involvement of a matriarch in somebody's life. The term narcissist has become something of a buzzword in recent years. But what happens when you see signs of narcissism in the woman who raised you? Now, I'm going to make an important distinction here, that when they talk about signs of narcissism, that might actually mean narcissistic traits. I think what they're saying is that the individual is a narcissist. We'll find out as we go through the article. But the point is, everybody has some narcissistic traits, and I don't like the description of saying, see signs of narcissism. If somebody has narcissism, they are a narcissist. If somebody hasn't got narcissism, they're not a narcissist, but they will have narcissistic traits. They can engage in narcissistic behaviours, but they're not narcissists. And it is important to make that distinction. Returning to the article, at 48, Charlotte, not her real name, who believes her mother is one of the 5% of people in the UK with narcissistic personality disorder, is still scared of her mum. I have suggested to you that 5% is higher, that those who have NPD, it's higher than 5%. But it's clear that the victim here believes that her mother has NPD. Everything revolved around my mother growing up, how she looked, how she felt, the impact something would have on her, she says. So the advancement of her appearance and the impact that it would have on her in terms of that subconscious threat to control. She often asked, how do you think that made me feel? Victim mentality, pity play. There was very little empathy for other people. It was always about her, with little responsibility or even acknowledgement of her bad behaviour, lack of accountability, blindness to her behaviour. Today the term narcissist probably sounds more familiar than it did, say, 5 years ago. On TikTok, the hashtag NarcTalkAdvice is flooded with videos of people explaining narcissistic traits and red flags to look out for. Official criteria for a diagnosis ranges from a lack of empathy to being preoccupied with fantasies of success, power and brilliance. The term's ascension has, of course, led to overuse. It's often bandied about as a synonym for someone simply being selfish or vain, but it is a real condition that has huge implications for people who have to deal with narcissists in their family dynamic. At least the article understands and makes the relevant distinctions. Growing up with a narcissistic mother can have a significant impact in both childhood and adulthood, says Catherine Hallisey, a chartered psychologist. Narcissists tend to have an inflated sense of importance and a deep need for validation and admiration, necessity of fuel, which can greatly impact their ability to meet their child's emotional needs. Instead, they prioritise meeting their own needs, the pursuit of the prime aims, and desires, often neglecting their child as they do so. Parental abrogation of responsibilities and duties, a lack of accountability, and an absence of emotional empathy. Narcissistic mothers may also try to control their children through emotional manipulation such as blaming, guilt-tripping, and excessive criticising, which Hallisey says can cripple daughters' self-esteem. Their parenting, as a result, might be inconsistent, alternating between overindulgence and neglect. Both of those, of course, can form lack of control environments. Because this mother-daughter relationship looks very different from the one idealised in our culture, Hallisey explains that daughters of mothers with narcissistic traits often feel lonely, ashamed, and isolated. This is something Charlotte experienced during her own adolescence when she began struggling with the eating disorder, anorexia. Instead of focusing on how the eating disorder would impact Charlotte, her mother complained that in comparison to Charlotte's frail fame, she looked fat, triangulation, belittlement, invalidation. Time and time again, throughout her childhood, Charlotte says she was made to feel inadequate and silenced by her mother. I was told I was stupid, fat and ugly, belittlement, insult, she says, that I wasn't as clever as her. As an adult, Charlotte has tried to put boundaries in place so that she interacts with her mother only when necessary, moving 6 hours away to create distance. Sensible of her to move away, but better not to try and put any boundaries in other than that of no contact. Remember, the narcissist will not recognise or appreciate those boundaries. But the relationship has still left a hangover of low self-worth. I constantly strive for more in my career and home life because of what my mum put me through, she says. It's exhausting. I feel like I'm living a double life because I'm carrying this dirty little secret about how terrible my mother has been and how much it's affected me. Even though Charlotte insists her mother is narcissistic, she was never officially diagnosed. The only way to obtain an official diagnosis of NPD is through a psychologist or psychiatrist, and Hallisey doesn't generally advise people to ask anyone to seek out a diagnosis. You could be wrong, or you could further rupture the relationships, she explains. Instead, Hallisey recommends that daughters of mothers with suspected NPD seek therapeutic support while seeing if their mother might be open to having therapy herself. That is bad advice. If you believe that you're dealing with a narcissist, you're better off having nothing to do with them. Of course, you need to have an assessment and utilize the tools and materials that I provide to help you understand that you are dealing with a narcissist, and then having had that confirmed, the best thing to do is look after yourself. Trying to convince a suspected narcissist to undertake therapy is only going to bring about a poor result for you. You're going to give more fuel to the narcissist. You're going to have your own emotional thinking increased. You're going to be subjected to more manipulations and horrible behaviour. Rather than attributing a diagnostic label to a mother, Hallisey thinks it's much more helpful to focus on the support that's needed. It's essential to establish clear boundaries with your mother. Again, poor advice. We don't respect boundaries. Don't try and enforce them with us. What type of behaviour is acceptable to you? What's not, and how much contact you want? No. You state that you don't want the contact. Between working with a therapist to discover unresolved issues, building a strong network of people for support, and developing individualized coping strategies, there can be hope for a healthy, defined relationship between daughters and their narcissistic mothers. No, bad advice again. You cannot have a healthy relationship with a narcissist, and to suggest that you can is incorrect and dangerous. If they're talking about someone with narcissistic traits, that's something different. But here, the victim believes that she's dealing with a narcissist, and the advice that's coming from the therapist is about having these strategies, etc., to have a healthy, defined relationship. You cannot have that with a narcissist. And once again, this is somebody who supposedly understands narcissism getting it wrong. The difficulty in changing a toxic mother-daughter dynamic is something that Laura, 40, knows well. When she thinks back to the relationship she had with her mum as a child, who she believes is a narcissist, she remembers constantly trying to keep her happy. Otherwise, we'd be subjected to her silent treatments. Assertion of control, nullification of threat to control, which she would often use until we apologised profusely. She remembers, she was a master of looking through you like you weren't there. It made me feel wretched. Another way this narcissism manifested was an unsettling focus on Laura's looks, choosing to keep her out of the sun for months to keep her Indian skin as fair as possible, triangulation with the weather and her complexion. It was so that she could show me off, Laura explains. I had to dress a certain way, control through clothing, and look the way she wanted, all so it would make her look good. Individual as an extension of self. I grew up incredibly insecure and believed my worth was tied solely to what I looked like. As an adult, Laura has spoken to her mother to explain how all the comments on her skin colour, weight and dress sense impacted her, both then and now. Of course, it's understandable why Laura would do this. She wants to share how it's affected her, and with the expectation that her mother might realise that she'd done something wrong and apologise, adjust her behaviours, perhaps even just explain why she behaved as she did. However, Laura explains that her mother brushes it off, telling her to stop being dramatic. Dismissiveness, nullification of threat to control, projection. Laura, who has suggested her mother see a therapist, says she's very good at gaslighting. Today, Laura focuses instead on managing her relationship with her mother with the help of her own therapist, recognising when she's being manipulated and drawing boundaries to avoid being hurt. A better approach would be to have nothing to do with her, therefore you won't be manipulated. Or, if you're going to have some form of involvement, you reduce it to the very minimum and recognise there is no point in trying to impose boundaries. Recently, we had a huge argument. This again demonstrates how Laura is getting sucked in time and time again, rather than obeying a total no-contact regime. Laura says, she hurt me badly, refused to apologise, and even got angry with me for making a big deal out of nothing. Projection, blame-shifting. But now I'm much quicker to step out of my hurt than I used to be. I can see that everything she does has nothing to do with who I am. That's been huge. Like many people with troubled parental relationships, Laura is in the process of letting go of the typical mother-daughter relationship she once dreamed about. That is sensible. I've had to take time to grieve the relationship I fought so hard to have that never happened, she says. I'm letting go of the mother I always wanted her to be. I can't change her, and it isn't my job to do so. Well, that's good that she recognises that. But it's evident that there is still more that she could be doing. So some observations there which are correct and also provide you with further insight into the way that people experience being an adult child of a matriarch, but also demonstrates poor advice that's provided from so-called professionals, which is only going to make the situation worse. I have numerous videos about parental narcissists. Just search for the term parent or parental. And if you have difficulties dealing with a narcissist in your family, whether it's a parent, sibling, such like, or your child is the narcissist and they're an adult, then you should utilize how to handle a parental narcissist. It's applicable to all those scenarios that I've just mentioned, and you can find it in the Knowledge Vault. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.